Welcome CSC 200 to part 3 of our PHP intro. And what we did in our last video was basically make a connection to our server. We didn't connect to our database, we connected to our server localhost by using one of these connection scripts here. We made a couple variables. We copied and pasted, but we used variables to actually connect, and we even ran a little conditional statement that made sure, or even gave us an error code if we were not connecting or why we weren't connecting. So that kind of gives us some feedback if we have any errors in our code. I'm going to fix my code here first so I don't have any more errors, and I'll fix that. And I'm going to go back now to W3 Schools, and we were at the connect section. And now we're going to go to that. We're going to skip over a couple things here. We're not creating databases or insert anything. We're just going to select data. We just want to run some queries. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to select, and we're going to take a look at what they have here, and some of these things are queries that we already know how to do, so that's not a big issue, and we already did this. We're going to do the one that's procedural, and notice it has 4 lines. Now they have a thing called DB name, and they call it MyDB. You can call it anything you want. We're not going to call it MyDB. We're going to call it whatever database we have. So I'm going to just go back to MAMP, open my start page, and open phpMyAdmin if I don't have it open. And here's my world database. That's one you should probably have in there. So we're going to go with the world database. We didn't do much to that, and we didn't change the name or anything. It should just be called world. I could click on it right now. And just remember, we had tables called city, country, country language when we worked on that. So I'm going to try to connect to that database. I just have to know it's called world with a small w. I'm going to go back to this select data, and I'm just going to take a look at the code. And they have an extra variable here that's going to stand for our database name. So I'm going to put that in. And we could just type that in. You don't have to copy it. I'm going to put a variable here, and I'm going to call it, I'll just call it DB name, and I'll just put equals, and then our database that we're using is called world. So that's all we need to connect to world. And then you can also put it in here. You can put it after here. You could put, this should be DB name. This should be the variable. That way, whatever you can change this, and you don't have to change any of this code. That's the whole point of using a variable, so that you don't have to keep putting world, world, world. You just put DB name. Then if you change it, if we use pirates, you could put pirates up here, and everything else will update. So I'm going to just call this, put DB name in here. And eventually we'll see, this is showing how we actually concatenate. Instead of using a plus sign like we do with ActionScript and JavaScript, they use a dot to concatenate. So you can concatenate, but it's been working without it. If you would concatenate this, you would just do something like this, and you'd put a dot like that, and then let's say you wanted a period at the end, you'd put another dot, and you'd put a period inside the quotes, because that's part of the string. So I'd put an extra quote here. I mean, this is the period, this is a dot. So dots are like the plus signs. They separate variables from strings. These are the string that's going to display, this is the variable. So that's a way to concatenate. So we'll see if that works. It should show us world in there when we do that. So we can just see if we're connecting to world, and I'll just go back to my local host, and I'll refresh that, and it isn't working. So I must have some error in my code there. I don't have a semicolon there, and that's the problem. Now it says connect successfully to world. So those little things, those little semicolons, sometimes they don't matter, but in PHP they do. Okay, so now we connected to our database, and what do we want to do with our database? Now's what's kind of interesting. We can actually run queries in here. So we can select and display things on a page. Now this part is probably the more difficult part, and I'm not going to try to explain all of it, but we'll just try it out. I'm going to go back to this select data, and you can see that we connected. We created a connection with our con variable. Then we checked if the con works. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of create a variable that's going to represent our query. So this SQL is really going to be our query. We can even call it query if we want. We don't have to call it SQL. So we're going to do that. And then they also have something that's basically it's going to take our result of the connection and the query, and then it's going to run it on a page. So we're not going to worry about all this right now. But what we are going to, I'm just going to copy all of it. I'm going to copy all of this right now. And I'm going to put it all in between my closing tags. So after this, I'll put 2 Now this is actually the query, so I could probably even put a, represents the query, because that's what it is. And it'll look just like the query we do in SQL, represents the query. And we might even want to just call, instead of SQL, just call it query, because that's really what it is. We could just call it query. And the query says select ID first name from my, this isn't, we're not using this actually, so we're not using any of this. So I'm going to take that out. So we have to take that out. What we want to do is we'll do a select query. Remember, we do select, we do asterisk, and let's say we want to select, we'll go back to our database, and you could run a query here just to check it out. Let's say we want to run we did one that like all the countries that were in North America, where the continent is North America. Remember, these are the columns, and let's say we want to select all the countries where with the continent is North America. We want to select all columns from the table country where continent equals North America, and you could see the way it's spelled out. And if you're not sure, remember, you could go in here and you could almost write the query and then you could double check it. But we want to do this from the page. But if you're not sure about it, you could do select from, because remember, this will give you what you need to know from your database. So we're going to select from, and here's country, and then we'll do where, and we'll say where continent equals, and then we'll do in quotes North America, and we'll put a quote, and then we'll end it with a semicolon. And we don't need that necessarily. It should work fine without that. If it works fine here without that, we should be fine. And it does. And there's 37 total. That I don't really want that many, but that's okay. That'll work. So we know we have 37. So there's going to be 37 lines of code that are going to be on our page. If I go back to my SQL, what I can actually do is highlight this and copy it and go back to brackets and just put it in the quotes. So PHP puts this in the quotes. Now you see North America shows up in black there. That's kind of odd. And the reason that is because we have quotes inside of quotes. So we should really do if we have double quotes on the outside, we should do single quotes on the inside. And that looks better already. And I don't think we need a semicolon in the middle. We don't need that there. So that should be fine. And now that's what we're going to do. So they also have a variable set up for the result. This is our query, and then this is the result. And there's a function called MySQLi query, and I'll show you where all that is, and we'll look into that a little more depth. I just want to make sure it works for now. So this would have to be query, and you can see that's matching up. So the result is the result of the query of the connection and running the query. Now everything that's happening here, don't worry too much about yet. But what it's going to do, this is code, and we'll break it down later. That's actually going to display it on a page in separate rows. So it's just a way of taking that information that's going to be displayed. So we have to decide what information is going to display right now. So we could just display the country if we wanted to. We don't have to display anything else from it. So we're going to go take a look at our columns and see exactly what columns we want to display. Looking at our result from our query that we did in phpMyAdmin, what would we want to display? Maybe the code, maybe the name and the continent. Maybe we'd actually want to put the name first, then the code, then the continent. So maybe 3 things. I don't even know. We're saying all from North America anyway, but maybe we'll just put that in. So let's say 3 things: code, name, and continent. And before we do that, notice code has a capital C, name has a capital N, and continent has a capital C. So we just need to know that. So we'll put in those 3 things, and then we'll look at our code that we have here in brackets, because they have an existing one from a sample, but we'll try to use what they have. They have row, row, row. So they actually have 3 things here. And you could see, they're echoing, so it means it's putting on a page. Now, all that this means right now, and it's saying if the result is greater than 0, then it's going to do this. It's running a while loop, and what that means, it's going to keep going through and displaying it each time as long as there's a result. So as long as there's a result, it's going to keep displaying a line of code until it ends. And and as long as there's some results, and it's echoing to the page, and these are just little previews, so we can change this. The first one, if we would just want to put, we could just put, you know, we can even put country name. We could put this any way we want. We'll put country name, and I'm typing everything wrong here, and I'll take out the, so we'll say country name, and it has a colon, then it has a space, and then it's going to put the country name, except what's going to be in here is actually name, that the column goes in here. And remember, it had capital N, so we're going to put the country name, and then here it has a, I'm not sure why it has a dash here, but we can take this out, and we're going to just put code. We'll just put code there, and then what's going to go in here is going to be code, because that's the column name. And then the last thing we have here, they have something empty here, because they're kind of putting a space in here. So we have code, space, and then we have that, and then we actually have, we may have to put extra space in here when we do this, but we'll see what it looks like. And then in between here, in between the next one, they have last name. So let's put in, we're going to put in continent, and a colon, and then a space. Now we may have, depending what happens after each one, we may have an issue here. So, but we'll just see what happens. And then remember, this is the name of the column. And we'll practice this more, so if it seems confusing, that's okay. We'll just see if this works first with what we have. So it's going to echo the country name, and then it should take from the name column, and then it's the code, it should take from the code column, and then the continent should be from the continent column. And let's just make sure we have everything right up here. We have query, we have query, we have con, we have con. These are variables that were set up already, result, result, and the only other variables are just row, and it actually defined the variable row right in here with this fetch associate result. And again, we'll look at that again. These are all built-in MySQLi functions that exist already. So, you know, they exist already. You just have to make sure to put in the right information. That's the idea of understanding how PHP works. So let's just save this and see what happens. Now, we could get an error, and that's okay. So I'm going to go back to Chrome, and I'll go to here, and I'll return, and look at that. I have connected successfully to world country name. Now everything's jumbled together. We could fix the way it displays, but it does have country name, and it has Anguilla, and then it has code. See, we don't have spaces between these, and plus eventually we're going to want to put this in a table, because all in one line it gets all jumbled together. And I don't even know if I'd even put country name, code, or any of that. None of that really helps. I think now that we look at it, and there's 37, and it doesn't show us how many there are, so we'll have to make sure we have something that shows us how many. But just before we stop here, let's just go in and just clean this up. I don't want to have it say country name, so I'm actually gonna just get rid of that and just have name. And what I'm gonna have after name, instead of the word code, I'm just going to have like a couple spaces. So I'm just going to do a, I'll put in 3 spaces there and see how that works. And then it shows the code. And then I'm not going to lead it off a continent again. I'll just put 1, 2, 3 spaces. So we have the name and we have the code. In fact, I don't even need continent. Since we're doing them all from North America, although maybe I'll leave it there from now. But that's, and then there's a line break at the end. That breaks it so that it goes to a new line, or they all be together. So let's see what happens just by doing that. I'll save it. I'll do Command S and save it, and I'll rerun it. And now it looks a little better. Now we have an extra space. If we want to put space in there, we can do that. We could put that right in our code, because that's that connected successfully. You know, we could even go in here and put a line break if we wanted to. We could put 2 line breaks if we wanted to. We could put 2 BRs in here, right in that quote, that after that DB name, so that when it starts this, there's some space there. So we can put HTML tags inside of there. So let me take a look at that, and we'll run it again and see. That's what it did. It put 2 line breaks in there. Now if we look at the code, we could even go view developer, view source. This is the code that got written, and you can see what it did. It put, there's our 2 line breaks, and then it wrote all these things, and it put line breaks between each line, And then we have our regular HTML, which is down here that says hello world. So that's what it returned. It created an HTML. Our PHP created an HTML page. That's what PHP does. It's a server-side script that makes dynamic web pages. This is a dynamic web page. It got created on the fly by PHP. That's what it does. It creates pages on the fly. That's the way WordPress works. The PHP makes pages on a fly. So that's what it did by running our original code, which actually had the query in it. So, when you go to a site and you search for something, or you go on Amazon and it gives you a listing back, that's what it's doing. It's pulling from a database and it's showing you information. So we just did a query in here. Now we did it manually. I mean, you don't go to a website, Amazon, and run a query. You hit a button and then it does the query for you. So we'll eventually have to set up web pages so that we make it easy for people to search for what they want or add what they want. But this is the start. This is just the start of what we're doing here. This is kind of this is the core. We're connecting to our server localhost. We have our username, password. We know what database we're working from. So we could change this to pirates, and we could search all players, and then we could display the pictures or something, anything like that. So we're going to do some of that. We'll break this down a little bit more, but this is the start. And I think this is kind of the fun part, because we get a chance to kind of connect with our database and write stuff to a page. And then, from there, there's a lot of different things we're going to be able to do. We'll stop here. We'll let you get started on that. And then what you'll be able to do is just send me the PHP page. We'll let you either upload the PHP page or just email it back to me. You're not going to have to send me the folder or anything like that. I don't need the database because you already have the world database, but you can just send me this back and we'll check your code and make sure if it works. And, hopefully you'll know if it does. Email me if it doesn't. But let's take a break here and see how this goes so far.